What would you do if the janitor at your gym tapped out the head instructor in front of everyone? You ever meet someone and think you know exactly who they are, only to find out later you couldn't have been more wrong? That's exactly what happened at a small gym in Columbus, Ohio, a place where sweat, ambition, and pride mixed together like fuel and fire. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon. The gym wasn't packed, but enough people were there to keep the place alive. You had the usual crowd, a couple of college kids rolling on the mats, an older guy in the corner hitting the heavy bag, and a few white belts sitting cross-legged watching every move like it was a tutorial for their next big break. And then there was Darius Monroe. If you walked in that day and glanced at him, you'd think he was just, well, the janitor. And you'd be right. Worn-out sneakers, faded work shirt, carrying that mop bucket like it was an old friend. He kept to himself, headphones in, moving from one end of the gym to the other, wiping sweat stains off the mirrors, picking up after people who never seemed to know where the trash can was. People saw Darius every single day. Some nodded at him, some didn't even bother. He wasn't flashy, didn't talk much, just worked quietly, finished his shift, and left. If he was a book, most folks didn't even bother to read the cover. But that's the thing about life. You never really know what's written inside someone else's pages. Now, standing across the room that day was Ethan Caldwell, the guy everyone knew. If the gym had a king, it was him. Black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, multiple medals hanging in the office window, his name on the wall. Ethan wasn't just skilled. He had that energy, the type that draws people in. Always smiling, always confident. Sometimes too confident. He was the one who got people hyped up before sparring, the one who clapped the loudest when his students hit a clean submission. To them, he was untouchable. The guy you wanted to impress and the guy you definitely didn't want to make look bad. But here's where things got interesting. That day, a few students were sitting around talking after class. Their voices carried across the room, something about how tough the last session was. One of them joked, "Man, I swear I thought I was going to die rolling with you, coach." Ethan laughed, like he always did, and started giving tips on how to stay calm when someone's trying to choke you out. Darius was mopping near the edge of the mats, pretending not to listen. But then, something slipped. A small comment, almost too quiet to notice. "Breathing's the key," Darius said under his breath, like he was talking to himself. The students turned. Ethan turned too. "What was that?" Ethan asked, grinning. Darius looked up, mop in hand. "I said, breathing's the key. People panic when they can't breathe. That's when they lose." The room got a little quieter. One of the white belts smirked. "You roll before or something?" Darius shrugged. "A little." That's all it took. That little shrug was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Ethan tilted his head, still smiling, but now there was a spark behind his eyes. "A little, huh? You want to spar just for fun?" Darius looked at him for a moment. Then he said something nobody expected. "Sure." But little did they know, this wasn't going to be just a friendly roll. It was about to become a story the whole gym would talk about for years. The room went still for a second, like everyone needed to process what they just heard. A janitor agreeing to spar with a black belt? That wasn't something you saw every day. One of the students laughed nervously. "Wait, for real?" Darius just leaned the mop against the wall, calm as if someone asked him to help move a chair. He didn't brag, didn't hesitate, just walked over to the edge of the mats and started unlacing his sneakers. Ethan grinned wider, that kind of grin people wear when they're sure they're about to put on a show. "All right then," he said, clapping his hands together. "Give me 5 minutes. Let me grab some water." The white belt started whispering immediately. "Yo, this is going to be quick. Poor guy's about to get folded. Bro's going to regret opening his mouth." But Darius didn't flinch, didn't even look at them. He sat down on the mat, stretched his legs slowly, and waited. There was something in his body language, still controlled, almost too calm. When Ethan came back, the vibe shifted. This wasn't a class anymore. It was an event. People were pulling out their phones, pretending not to record while holding them low. A couple of guys who were about to leave decided to stick around. Even the receptionist leaned over the counter for a better view. "All right, man," Ethan said, tying his belt tight around his waist. "No ego here, just a little fun." Darius nodded. "Cool. You trained before?" Ethan asked, sliding his mouth guard in. "A little," Darius replied again. Same tone, same shrug as before. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. All right then, let's do this. 2 minutes, light roll. Darius stood up, barefoot now, rolling his shoulders. He didn't say a word, just stepped onto the mat like he'd been there 1,000 times before. And here's the thing. People noticed something right away. The way he walked. It wasn't loud or showy, but there was balance. A kind of quiet confidence, like someone who knows what every inch of their body is supposed to do. Ready? Ethan asked. Darius gave a small nod. They slapped hands, bumped fists, and just like that, the match began. At first, Ethan was relaxed, smiling, even laughing a little. He reached for Darius's collar, testing him. But Darius didn't flinch. He didn't react the way most beginners do. No jerky movements, no stiff arms. He just flowed, smooth and controlled, like water slipping past rocks. Ethan tried a quick grip and pull to set up a takedown, but before his brain could even register what happened, Darius pivoted, light on his feet, and suddenly Ethan was the one losing balance. Whoa, someone muttered. Ethan regained his footing, smiling like it was no big deal, but now there was a little crease between his eyebrows. He tried again, this time with more force. A strong collar drag. Darius let it happen halfway, then reversed it so cleanly it looked like a demo video. Next thing everyone knew, Ethan was on his knees, scrambling to defend. The whispers started. Wait, what? Did you see that? Yo, no way this guy's just a janitor. Ethan laughed it off, but inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pressure. Real pressure. Because whoever Darius Monroe was, he wasn't some dude who watched a few YouTube videos and decided to try a role. This man had experience. Real experience. The clock ticked past 1 minute, and nobody was breathing normal anymore. Except Darius. His chest rose and fell like he was just walking in the park. Meanwhile, Ethan's smile started fading, replaced by clenched teeth. And then, right as Ethan reached for another grip, Darius did something that made every jaw in that gym drop. He swept Ethan, effortlessly, like it was nothing. Ethan hit the mat hard but rolled out quick, back to his feet. He forced a laugh, trying to save face. Okay, he said, almost panting now. You got some tricks. But Darius? He just looked at him with those calm, steady eyes and said, your turn. And that's when everyone realized. This wasn't just some friendly match anymore. This was a test, and it was only the beginning. The gym was dead silent now, except for the squeak of bare feet on the mat and the faint hum of the AC. Every set of eyes was locked on those two men. Phones were tilted just enough to catch every move without making it obvious. Some folks were already thinking about the captions they'd write later. You won't believe what happened at the gym today. Ethan circled Darius, shoulders rolling, trying to hide the fact that his heart was pounding harder than it should be. He wasn't used to this. Normally, when he sparred with a beginner, it was like playing with a younger cousin. Easy, predictable, almost boring. But this felt different. He crouched low, reaching for a quick single leg, fast, explosive. But as soon as his hand brushed Darius's knee, the janitor shifted his weight and countered with such precision that Ethan felt like he ran into a wall made of silk and steel at the same time. Man, what the? One of the students whispered. Darius didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He just kept moving, calm, controlled, like he'd been drilling this for decades. Ethan tried again, this time going for an inside trip. He thought he had it, until Darius turned his hips and hooked Ethan's leg mid-air, sending him down in a smooth, almost elegant reversal. Gasps, actual gasps from the sidelines. Yo, he just reversed a black belt like it was nothing. I thought this dude cleaned floors. One guy in the back whispered, he's not breathing hard. Look at him. Dude's not even sweating. They were right. Darius looked like he'd just taken a stroll. His expression hadn't changed since the first slap and bump. Meanwhile, Ethan's face was flushed, beads of sweat rolling down his temple. The timer beeped. 2 minutes were up. Ethan exhaled hard and pulled out his mouthguard. Man, he said, forcing a laugh, you're not bad at all. Darius smiled faintly. You too. That should have been the end. A little friendly roll, a laugh, everyone goes home with a story. But pride doesn't work like that. Not in a gym. Not when there's an audience. Let's run another round, Ethan said, already tying his belt tighter. You sure? Darius asked, not cocky, just matter of fact. Oh, I'm sure, Ethan said, his voice a little sharper now. Let's go 5 minutes this time. The white belts went crazy. Phones were definitely out now. The receptionist had both elbows on the counter like it was front row at a fight. Darius shrugged and knelt back down. 5 minutes, he repeated, like it was nothing. When they slapped hands again, the energy in the room shifted. No more smiles, no more playing around. Ethan came forward hard this time, snapping grips, pushing the pace. His pride was on the line, and everybody knew it. But here's the thing. The harder Ethan went, the calmer Darius became. Every attack had an answer. Every scramble ended with Ethan back where he started, or worse. It was like watching a masterclass nobody signed up for. Yo, who is this guy? Someone whispered. A blue belt near the wall said, I don't know, but that's not beginner stuff. That's years. Like serious years. Halfway through the round, Ethan shot for a deep double leg. This was his A-game, his bread and butter. He lifted with everything he had, driving forward, only for Darius to sprawl so fast it was like he teleported. In one clean motion, he spun to Ethan's back. Hooks in, seatbelt grip. Holy! Someone blurted, then covered their mouth. Ethan froze. He knew what was next. Rear naked choke territory. The kind of position black belts put white belts in when they want to make a point. And yet, Darius didn't squeeze, didn't even try to finish. He just held the position like he owned it, like he was saying without words, I could end this whenever I want. The timer beeped again, 5 minutes. Ethan rolled out slowly, breathing heavy now. He sat up, wiped his forehead, and stared at Darius for a long moment. There was no trash talk, no fake smile this time. Just a question lingering in the air, unspoken but loud enough for everyone to hear. Who is this man? Yo, Ethan finally said, catching his breath. Where'd you learn to move like that? Darius looked at him, eyes calm, voice steady. Here and there. That answer only made it worse. The mystery grew bigger. Students were whispering theories now. Military? Pro fighter? Bro, maybe he was like on a national team or something. Ethan wiped his face with a towel, still staring at him like he was trying to solve a puzzle. But little did they know, the real story behind Darius Monroe was something none of them were prepared to hear. And the next round? That was where everything changed. The mats had gone from a training space to a stage. Everyone was leaning forward now. Students, casual visitors, even the guy who usually spent more time scrolling on his phone than drilling techniques. Nobody wanted to blink. This wasn't just sparring anymore. It felt bigger. Ethan spit his mouthguard into his hand and said, Last one, 10 minutes. Let's go. That wasn't a suggestion. That was pride talking. 10 minutes of rolling would drain anyone, and Ethan was betting fatigue would crack the janitor's calm facade. Darius simply nodded. No ego, no theatrics, just that same quiet readiness. They slapped hands again. The timer beeped, and the storm began. Ethan came forward hard, snapping grips like a whip. His plan was clear: break Darius's rhythm, force him into chaos, make him scramble, because in chaos, the more experienced fighter always shows. But the thing was, there was no chaos. Darius flowed like water poured into every crack Ethan left behind. Every time Ethan tried to impose pressure, Darius redirected it with angles so clean it looked rehearsed. Man, he's not even resisting, someone muttered. He's not resisting. He's redirecting. At 2 minutes in, Ethan thought he saw an opening, a loose guard as Darius sat back. He exploded forward, trying to pass with everything he had. Big mistake. Darius's hips shifted like lightning. Next thing anyone knew, Ethan was airborne for a split second before hitting the mat, flat, on his back. Darius landed in mount so smooth, it looked like something out of a demo reel. Gasps rippled through the room. One guy near the wall couldn't help blurting out, Yo, he just mounted him like it was nothing. Ethan tried to bridge hard, muscles straining, but Darius's base didn't budge. He was heavy without looking heavy, balanced like his body had memorized this position 1,000 times over. Dude, that's control, whispered a purple belt under his breath. Ethan gritted his teeth, trying to hip escape, but every move he made opened another door for Darius to walk through. Knee ride, switch to side control, back to mount. It was like a clinic, but a quiet one, without a single ounce of ego. 4 minutes in, sweat poured down Ethan's face. Darius? Not even breathing hard. He moved like someone in complete harmony with every inch of the mat. Like the fight was just a slow conversation only he understood. Finally, Ethan managed to explode out, scrambling back to his feet. The gym erupted in claps like he'd just scored a comeback touchdown. But deep down, everyone knew. Escaping wasn't a victory, it was survival. Ethan forced a smile, hands on his knees. "You're good, man," he panted. "Really good." Darius tilted his head. "You too." They reset. The crowd whispered louder now. "Bro, this guy has to be ex-military." "No way. He moves like a competitor." "What's he doing mopping floors then?" The last 5 minutes were war. Ethan went all in. Pressure passing, takedowns, chaining submissions like his reputation depended on it. Which, honestly, it did. But every attack met an answer. Every grip broken. Every sweep countered with a level of awareness that felt almost unfair. Then, it happened. With 2 minutes left, Ethan shot in deep for a takedown, desperate for something big. Darius sprawled again, and then, like it was effortless, he floated to Ethan's back mid-scramble. Hooks in, rear naked choke sunk halfway before Ethan even knew it. The gym exploded. "Oh my God! He took his back again! Dude, what is happening?" Ethan froze. He knew if Darius squeezed, it was over. His pride screamed to keep fighting, but his lungs begged for mercy. He tapped. Twice. Loud. Silence. Complete silence for half a beat. Then whispers. He tapped. He actually tapped. Holy. Darius let go immediately and sat back like nothing happened. No flexing. No celebration. Just calm. Ethan rolled to his knees, ripped out his mouth guard, and stared at him with wide eyes. For the first time in years, he didn't have a comeback. Didn't have a joke to lighten the mood. He just stared, chest heaving. Who are you?" he finally asked, voice raw. Darius looked at him for a long second. Then he said it, quiet but heavy. "Someone who used to fight for a living." The gym went dead silent again. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Flat. Like it wasn't a brag. Like it wasn't even a memory he enjoyed holding. Someone in the back whispered, "Used to fight for a living like MMA?" Ethan wiped sweat from his face, still staring. "You were a pro?" Darius didn't answer. He just stood up, brushed the chalk off his hands, and started picking up his mop like the whole thing never happened. But that wasn't the end of the story. That was just the crack in the door, and what came next would blow it wide open. The match was over. The room felt heavier, like the air itself was trying to make sense of what just happened. Phones were being shoved back into pockets. Some people pretended they weren't recording, suddenly very interested in their water bottles, but the whispers didn't stop. "Bro, he said he used to fight for a living." "Used to? Like UFC? Why would a guy like that be scrubbing mats?" Nobody asked him directly, not yet. There was something about Darius's presence that made people hesitate. Not fear, exactly. Respect. The kind you don't fake. Ethan was still on the mat, kneeling like a man who had just been baptized in reality. His pride had taken a hit, but deeper than that, something else was gnawing at him. A question he couldn't shake. He finally stood up, sweat dripping from his chin, and walked over to where Darius was already wringing out a mop like the Spar had been a warm-up. "Hey," Ethan said, his voice low enough that only a few close by could hear. "You serious about that? About fighting?" Darius didn't look up. "Yeah." "MMA?" "Yeah." Ethan ran a hand through his damp hair. You were a pro?" Darius finally looked at him. His eyes were steady, but there was something behind them. Something heavy. "Yeah," he said again. "Long time ago." That answer was enough to light the rumor mill on fire. People started Googling on their phones under the counter, typing Darius Monroe MMA into search bars. Nothing obvious came up. No highlight reels, no famous interviews. But a couple of old fight forum posts popped up, grainy photos of a man who looked younger, leaner, but with the same calm stare. One of the students whispered, "Yo, I think he fought in Pride back in the day, or one of those old school circuits." Another shook his head. Nah, probably underground stuff. Dude moves like he's done hundreds of rounds. While everyone else speculated, Ethan stayed quiet. He just watched as Darius went back to cleaning the mats, like none of this mattered. And that bothered him. Bad. Why? Ethan asked finally. Darius stopped mid-swipe. Why what? Why are you here? You could be running your own gym, teaching seminars, making real money. Darius let out a slow breath. Money isn't everything. The way he said it made Ethan blink. That wasn't some motivational quote. That was a confession. What happened? Ethan pressed. For a moment, Darius didn't answer, just stared at the mats, like they held the story nobody else deserved to hear. Then, quietly, fighting cost me more than it gave me. The words hung there like a weight nobody could lift. Ethan wanted to push, wanted to ask, what does that mean? But the look on Darius's face told him he didn't want to go there. Not now. Maybe not ever. Still, something about that answer, it hit hard. Not just for Ethan, but for everyone listening. Because here was a man who had everything most fighters dreamed of. Skill, presence, experience. And yet, he walked away. The whispers turned into murmurs. Maybe he lost everything. Family stuff? Man, I bet he got injured bad. Darius broke the silence with something nobody expected. He looked at Ethan, not with anger, not with ego, but with a strange mix of patience and finality, and said, Ethan, you're good, real good, but don't let this game eat you alive. The words hit harder than any sweep. Ethan didn't know why, but his chest tightened like someone had just told him something he needed to hear. And then Darius just walked out, grabbed his jacket, his old duffel bag, and left the gym as quietly as he came in. The door shut behind him. The gym stayed silent for a full 30 seconds. Then, like someone had hit a switch, the voices erupted. Bro, that was insane. Did you see how calm he was? Yo, he tapped Ethan. Ethan. But for Ethan, he didn't hear any of that. He just stood there, still staring at the door, the words echoing in his head. Don't let this game eat you alive. And none of them knew it yet. But those words were about to change Ethan's life. The gym didn't feel the same after Darius left. The chatter kept going, but it was different, low, curious, almost reverent. People were still in shock. Some tried to laugh it off, making jokes to break the tension. Others just kept replaying the scene in their heads. But Ethan? He sat on the edge of the mat, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it held the answers to questions he didn't even know he had. His students kept coming up to him. Coach, you good? You okay, man? Yo, that dude was crazy good. Who even was that guy? Ethan waved them off with a tired smile, but inside he was chewing on every second of what just happened. The takedowns, the sweeps, the control. Yeah, those stung. But it wasn't just that. It was the way Darius carried himself. No ego, no chest beating, just calm. And those words, don't let this game eat you alive. They hit different now because Ethan knew what he'd been feeling lately. The pressure to win every role, the weight of being the guy everyone looked up to. The quiet panic that came every time he lost a match in a tournament, like it wasn't just a loss, but proof he was slipping. He'd been so focused on building his name that he forgot why he started training in the first place. And here was a man who'd clearly been to the top of the mountain and walked away from it. By choice. That wasn't weakness. That was strength. The kind Ethan wasn't sure he had. Later that night, after the gym emptied out, Ethan sat in his car with the engine running but the radio off. He stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror, sweaty and tired, and whispered to himself, "Don't let it eat you alive." Those words weren't just advice, they were a warning. The next morning, Ethan showed up early, before anyone else. Not to train, not to roll, but to sit on the edge of the mat in silence. For the first time in years, he asked himself, what am I chasing? And is it worth what I'm losing? He didn't have the full answer yet, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let pride run his life anymore. As for Darius, nobody saw him for a while. Some said he picked up extra shifts. Others swore they saw him at a local youth center teaching kids how to defend themselves. Nobody knew for sure. and maybe that was the point. Because the real story wasn't about who Darius was. It was about what he represented. A reminder that greatness isn't about medals or status. It's about balance, knowing when to fight and when to walk away. And that lesson stuck with Ethan and everyone who saw that spar for a long, long time. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the loudest truth. If this story made you stop and think, even for a second, drop a comment below. What do you think Darius gave up? Would you choose glory or peace? And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because there are more real-life stories like this one coming soon.